I would like to welcome you, dear friends and colleagues, everybody in the room. Thank you for having time to get involved. I would like to welcome everyone who is watching online and who will watch this activity. Today, we begin our presentation of the results of the general monitoring study of the quality of education during the war. Today, we can openly and frankly discuss the outcomes of education observed by State Service for Quality of Education within 3 years of this research. And we shall discuss by the example of mathematics and Ukrainian language. Thank you very much indeed for getting involved. I would like to invite the Minister for Education and Science of Ukraine, Mr. Oksana Lysový. Thank you, Ruslan. Thank you, dear colleagues from educational sector. Every hour business day, every working day, every day of education in our educational institutions starts with a minute of silence as we commemorate and remember those thanks to whom we could still keep working. I am saying that not for the reason that we need to make the minute of silence. It took place at 9 o'clock, the way it should have been, and the way it happens on every school. This is to remember about the context we are working, that we cannot avoid. We are working under huge pressure. Every day we receive, there are new victims. All that affects us, of course, and this affects our children, our youth, and our staff, our teams. Yet we keep the system of education. The war, by the scale, is equal to the Second World War. And it could not stop Ukrainian education. This is a very important focus and aspect that must be remembered every time. As we also managed to develop, even in comparison with the country at war, Russia, which is aggressor country, which now reduces programs, fails to pay wages in some of the regions to the teachers. We are keeping and we are developing. We invest into education. We do our best to invest into teachers, even the decisions related to wages. And this is our position. Education is a priority. I'm very grateful to the State Service of Quality of Education and UNICEF who have involved into this study. The study of the quality and level of knowledge of Ukrainian and mathematics, two languages, the language we communicate and the language of natural sciences, two most important components that we need to analyze precisely and which are the benchmark as a core for all other knowledge. And this is a very important study. I have studied, Ruslan has visited me, and we have discussed the results about the war, which I mentioned in the beginning, and the results of this study. We had to fall down. We were supposed to fall and decline, and we don't have such a decline. If we don't have the decline in the results, in the outcomes of our education, this is a great result under the current conditions. And of course, I would like to thank the teaching teams, educational people during the war and during the energy crisis that we survived this year, where we had to take all kinds of decisions, that we preserve the educational process somehow, and also under conditions of air alerts. This is a great victory of our education system. I congratulate you on this occasion. I would like to thank all of the educationalists. I would like to thank you for staying in the country and staying in the profession. This is a statement that we keep repeating, because everybody has a choice and you made your choice. Thank you very much. that on the political level, from the president and the parliament, we have the understanding from also local governments the importance of education and investment, from financial investment to time investment, and also personal investment and management investment for development of education, not just to maintain, but also to develop. In 3 years, we have increased the investment into education. There are government decisions, parliamentary decisions focused at development of education and science. It's important to keep all that, yet this would be not possible with your support. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank the educationalists, the parliament, the office of the president, and the president. Due to their focus of attention of whom it was possible to achieve certain results during this year. And of course, Ukrainian teachers deserve all possible appreciation. Dear Minister, we are grateful because just over the week of your stay on the position, when you became the minister, you have signed the order which gave the life to this monitoring and this process that we are discussing today. Dear friends, every time when we completed the monitoring in 2024 and now in 2025, every time we had the opportunity to discuss the results on the platform of the Committee of the Parliament for Education, Science and Innovations. I am happy that with us there is head of the committee, Mr. Sergei, and I would like to give him the floor. Mr. Ruslan, good afternoon, good morning. I'm at this time, 11 o'clock, we were supposed to start the meeting of the committee, yet the meeting of the committee was postponed just for the sake of having the meeting together with Deputy Minister Kaliboshin to be here with you. Why? Because for us it's important to make surveys and measurements in education. For many years we have discussed that we are missing, especially during the wartime, the educational measurements, the relevant data, verified data, based on which we could take management decisions. All of us, together with the ministry and together with colleagues, State Service of Quality in Education and other government institutions. Therefore, it's important for us. I have carefully read the short version of the study. I hope I can have a look at the full version over the weekend. It contains a lot of interesting data. It's quite indicative that they have measured 8th and 6th grade. All three measurements of the 8th grade is before NUSH, before the new Ukrainian school. And they have, regretfully, especially in mathematics, a negative trend. This is shown by the study. The 6th grades measured for the first year, non-new Ukrainian school, 6th grade, and two other belong to the new Ukrainian school. There was a small growth within the statistical errors. Therefore, the situation did not deteriorate, as we believe. It's not about the new Ukrainian school. It means that the system of education has built its resilience. And when we had a shock on the first year, 2022, the system of education could stabilize. And actually, this was during the biggest war after the Second World War, a biggest achievement of the country, and all of you and all of us together who have worked on it. As for the study itself, I would like you to listen less to me and to listen more about the survey. I believe you will be interested about the results, and it contains several obvious things. I spoke to Ruslan about it, and I believe that after we do the analysis of the presentation and the discussion, it would be worthwhile to make a short document with main findings that we can make everybody familiar with. When I say all, I mean all the directors, all the teachers, and all the parents. Because for us, as educationalists, there are obvious conclusions written that availability of home library and books at home radically improves the level of knowledge of children in Ukrainian language. The same way, as digital skills of the children improve his or her results on mathematics. Or if the child, during the results of the study, is positive about his subject and he or she likes the teaching, such a kid has much better results. Very interesting conclusions about homework. Those who fail to regularly do the homework show very low results, in the same way as low results are shown by those whose homework takes more than 2 hours. It's an obvious direction for the teachers that when they form the curricula or when they give homework, that between themselves the teachers agree, coordinate, that there is no overload of children, that they have enough time to master the material, but not excessively, that does not make results worse, because overload, overburden also has negative side. And finally, I would like to thank the State Service for Quality of Education that for the third year you make very important educational measurement. If we can say like that, Madam Vakulenko will correct me because maybe this is not so true. And yet there is data that we can rely on. And I would like to wish you to continue. And on one of the nearest meetings of the committee, we shall have a look in more detail on this data, and we shall discuss together so that we can jointly make conclusions. I would like to thank all of you. I wish you a nice day. And thank you, Sergei, for your nice words and your encouragement. Of course, we shall discuss it, and also today. This study would not be possible with no partners of ours, the people who have involved in this study, and also the people who have helped financially to organize this complicated monitoring. Therefore, let me thank, first of all, UNICEF for this partnership, and also invite the acting head of the Commission for Education of UNICEF, Mr. Fordin. Please have the floor.
Thank you. So, first of all, congratulations on the third year of this significant and very difficult exercise being concluded. And not only congratulations, but also thank you for letting us support this complex exercise. When looking at the results after several data takes and seeing how you have been reporting these data, I think there are some lessons that are worth taking from these results, and also some steps that need to be taken moving forward to make sure that this significant effort is not wasted, but that actually builds up the system. One of the main lessons is to understand how these discrepancies in some of the regions, rural, urban, for example, have implications on what is happening in the classrooms and how we should interpret and utilize those differences to improve learning. The role of IT, how it has significantly made education more accessible for large number of students, but also to understand, as per results that we've obtained worldwide, how this intervention of technology should be only regarded as a support and not a replacement of the teacher. So our effort should always be to use this as a mechanism that helps us to have one-to-one contact teacher-student. And that is the most important point for learning and for achieving. I also want to mention that there are differences in these results from results like the PISA studies. And it is important to understand that these are not equivalent tests, that they don't measure necessarily the same. One is intended for a more comparative perspective, for a more overall competency based, whereas this one is much more akin and closely related to the national curriculum. So when you see results like these, which show that there hasn't been deterioration, and you see PISA results, for example, where we see less neutral trends, please don't feel disheartened. This just means that you are doing your job well, But just as all Europe, we are seeing an overall tendency that we need to address with new approaches in education and more concentration on how students learn. And finally, two very important things about this study that you've conducted and for which you should feel motivated in the future is first, these data could potentially allow you to reach the classroom if dissemination strategies and communication strategies are developed that tap into the teacher. For example, releasing items that will not be used again so that they understand the logic behind the assessment, connect this standardized assessment with qualitative type assessments, formative assessments, make them relate. That would be very useful. And finally, you are now with multiple year assessments coming closer to something that's called growth models that review how changes in cohorts in different groups of students evolve. And that is quite significant, very rare globally, and it's something that will help you learn how the different contexts in which students are growing, the news reform, the invasion, COVID, these different factors around the children have affected learning, but also how we have been successful in moving forward. UNICEF, with its mandate to work in favor of children and to foster children's rights, will always be an ally in data gathering that builds up information to prepare a better future for the children. So thank you very much.
Дякую вам, дякую, друзі. І я буквально декілька тез, якщо ви дозволите, ми перейдемо безпосередньо до презентації результатів. І, Сергій Віталійович, відповідь на ваше запитання, яке ви задали, продовжити цю роботу. Ви знаєте, 3 роки тому назад, коли ми бралися за неї, ми були такими романтичними, мрійниками, думали, що ми можемо все здолати. То якщо б ви зараз прийшли до нас і сказали, візьміться зараз за цю роботу, ми б так довго шукали причини, чому ні. Ми б довго намагалися вам пояснити, що і це важко, і це складно, і це ми не можемо. Але тоді ми взялися за цю роботу, і насправді 3 роки поспіль ми її проводили. Я вже казав про пана Оксана, що він підписав не просто наказ, який дав життю цьому моніторингу. Він організував всіх навколо цього моніторингу. Тому що без наших партнерів, не тільки організації ЮНІСЕФ, але і без Українського інституту розвитку освіти, без платформи нашої ВШО, без Інституту освітньої аналітики, без Українського центру оцінювання якості освіти, без наших територіальних підрозділів, без департаменту.
Without territorial units, the departments of management of education, head teachers, this would be absolutely impossible. Therefore, I am sincerely grateful to you for this. However, we did it because we believed and we dreamed of one thing. We have seen that assessment which took place in the system of education and the results that we have from education during the war. And before that, we didn't have to be great analysts to understand that COVID, preceded by the year 2014, invasion to Ukraine, have influenced the results of education. Hypothetically, we could have expected this, yet we had no confirmation. We had no evidence base on which we could have based in order to take decisions in the future. And for this reason, we started this work. Also for ourselves, we wanted to do and give the answer to another 2 questions. State service of quality of education has a lot of opportunities to make the external assessment of the activity of schools, including institutional audit, also certification of teachers, and also different types of monitoring that we have. However, one element was missing. What happens with results of education? What we call quality of education. And therefore, we have undertaken that also this brick is also recovered.
Besides, this grade 6 and 8 are really indicative in this part because we were able to measure the first cycle of the primary school and actually the second part of the basic school to make sure that in grade 8, now that we can see the conclusions, we still have a chance to change something for the better. Because in grade 11, after all of Ukrainian tests, we can discuss all of this for a long time, whether this is the output, learning outcomes of the school, but nothing can be changed. And all of this is transferred to postgraduate educational establishments or different kinds of undergraduate establishments. So basically, we were able to find this brick. It took us 3 years to find it. It was a really challenging monitoring for us to undertake. And let me say that actually undertaking this nationwide monitoring was complicated and challenged by the fact that we had a lot of costs in terms of organization, methodology, and financial constraints as well. Just to develop the tests alone, to develop the tasks, and for 3 years back to maintain them at the same level of complication, this is a really big challenge for the system. So who could have done it better other than Ms. Olena Zaplotenska? I cannot see her, but she's raising her hand, and her team. We thank her and her team very much. Thank you, Olena, because virtually everything that took place during conducting this monitoring was borne by you. It was vested on your shoulders, and this was an incredibly difficult and a challenging task. So taking this opportunity, I would like to urge all of our colleagues and peers, those who are trying to undertake such monitoring, especially in the context of measuring educational losses, please don't do it, because this is not going to be representative or telling. Just to go for the representative sampling together with the Institute of Educational Analytics, we took hours of work to make it happen. This was incredibly difficult. In our monitoring study, this representation selection was very well chosen and selected. Moreover, you will be able to see both the status for the children, their learning outcomes, the children who are in temporarily occupied territories, and the children-based approach. Of course, we can take it with a pinch of salt, but we still can analyze this data. Moreover, friends, let me say the following. Today, we are about to present the results. These results will be compared to our institutional audits, and we will be able to compare the certification of the teachers, because the system is closely interconnected. We cannot interpret these results in line with the learning outcomes we have gained in math and the Ukrainian language. On the basis of this, we would like to go further beyond the boundaries and understand what conclusions can be drawn from this large and fundamental study. We would also like to broach this conversation within the society, what has been happening within the system of education over the last 3 years and where we are headed. Also, let me say the following. During every year after we will present this data, we presented this data, we went to different regions, and with this study after 2025, we will go to other macro regions working in the same format. So all of the issues that we are articulating, based on them, our experts develop different recommendations for the level of the school, community, and the country. And all of these proposals for the 2 years running have been sent to every educational department, to every school principal, to make sure that they could discuss it at their teams' levels without actually having to wait for solutions or decisions undertaken by the Parliament or the Ministry of Education for them to see what could be done immediately in their environments, because we can see the results that for many years running, topics, for example, in maths or geography, are not studied properly, not at the level that we would like them to be at. The same goes for the Ukrainian language. So, friends, we have a lot of ground to cover. And these results will definitely serve a very good and reliable ground for us to keep improving our educational system. So the only thing I want to appeal with you is we can interpret them in different, multiple ways. If you look into our large report, thick book, there's a lot to do for both educators, academics, and there's a lot to be undertaken by the institutes of postgraduate education. So it's something that we have to do for our teachers, what we have to do in order to upskill them, something that we have to do about the methodologies used to train our pupils. So this is what we are going to talk about, inclusive. Behind every conclusion presented, behind every set of numbers, there is a pupil and a child. So I kindly ask you, do be careful and cautious in discussing these results, because these children are the tomorrow's future of Ukraine. The school of today, and you can deny me in my arguments, is not only about teaching the Ukrainian language or maths. We're also talking about the cohesion within the society, about transversal skills that have to be mastered at the school level in one way or another, and soft skills likewise. So today we will be able to see our system at a glance and decide how we can change. So thanks again for gathering here with us. Thanks a lot for cheering for the school system in Ukraine. Ukraine nowadays is being shaped not only on the front line and at the cutting edge. It is being shaped in every classroom, and educational quality is not only about the learning outcomes, it's also about something that will transpire in 10, 20, or 30 years in the lives of every pupil studying today. So I'm sure that all of our professional community stands a very good chance, because we have the very nice skills and talents to make sure that all of these capacities of our system will not just be improved, but will be improved fundamentally. So thank you very much indeed to everyone. Now, as a follow-up to our work, I would like to invite and give the floor for us to move on to the recommendations to my colleague, Ivan YURIYCHUK, who will be presenting the results of the study. So the floor is yours, Ivan. Good morning, dear colleagues. Ruslan and Sergei have partially done what I was about to do, so I thank you very much indeed. So it will be a bit faster for me to go through my part. Anyway, something that I would like us to start with, dear friends. Just a second. So, today we are talking about the nationwide monitoring study, which was conducted by the Service of Educational Quality for 3 years, starting with the year 2023. And the title of my presentation, which is not so much about basically relating to you the content of this study, but rather about the dynamics that we were able to observe over the last 3 years that we have been conducting this monitoring. As I said, this monitoring study covers a 3-year cycle within the focus of 2 classrooms, 2 subjects within grade 6 and 8, math and Ukrainian. So why specifically these grades and why these subjects? Because grade 8 allows us to understand how we transit from primary school to basic school. When the organizational structure of educational process changes, there are more subjects, more teachers, higher requirements to become more independent, another rate and structure of educational work. And grade 8 demonstrates a situation which is on the brink of transition into high school. And at this stage, it's much easier for us to notice if there are different educational losses being accumulated. And of course, children will be choosing in favor of their educational trajectory very soon. So the Ukrainian language is a basic communication competency. This is why we have opted for it. It identifies the ability of the student to choose the thought, to argue their position and reason. While math is a logical competency, it shows how the pupil works with the data, structures, and assimilates all of this information. So in grade 6 In grade 6, we can see that the system supports the transition to the basic school and how this is done, while in grade 8, we can see how the pupil approaches the completion of this basic school, approaching the high school. So the Ukrainian shows to us basic communicative competence, while math shows us a basic logical aptitude of the people and ability to solve puzzles. So it's important to mention in terms of credibility to the study about the tools, the toolkit that we have implemented. So the study is based on the toolkit, preserving the structure of content lines and cognitive requirements. Every year, the structure of these basic tools was preserved, and this allows us to observe the dynamics over the last 3 years. So the toolkit meant test exercises to assess the learning outcomes achieved. Secondly, these were questionnaires meant for the pupils because we immediately understood the motivation, conditions of study, digital skills, homework, the need to support. And thirdly, the data submitted by the chiefs of educational establishments. This allowed us to understand the organizational context, the IDP status, and a lot of other things that contribute to the organization of education. In grade 6, which is very important to underscore, the tasks complied with the programs developed on the state standard developed for the year 2020. So in 2024 and 25, the tasks were developed in line with the new standards. For grade 8, the programs were based on the state standard approved in 2011. This is a very important difference for us to interpret all of these outcomes. We understand this discrepancy and understand what kind of test instruments were needed to undertake this study. The selection. It's also a very important aspect that I would like to underscore. In 2025, this selection of the educational institutions that we included, the number was 226 of all of the regions in the city of Kiev, and the main sampling included 166 educational institutions in the rural locations. The number was 60. And we also catered to the safety. It was important for us to keep the focus of all of this. So this is highly representative within the confines of all of the content of educational programs. So this is a reliable selection within our methodology. The standardized procedure allows us to reduce the risks and enables us to use that as the foundation for follow-up decisions. It's important to mention the standards of conducting the study itself. The reliability of this depends on the toolkit and the procedure. In 2025, within educational institutions, we had the responsible coordinator, instructor who wasn't a subject, teacher, and a technical administrator and observers, usually external observers. So the turnout of the pupils was more than 90% in each of the 4 blocks. The test was concluded by more than 1,000 pupils. We conducted more than 1,100 different kinds of observations. You may say that the number of educational institutions was only 226, but everything is correct. Because in the educational institutions, the pupils were divided into subgroups to ensure gadgets for every pupils, because everything was done on the special platform, online platform. So in one classroom, for example, if we had 30 pupils participating in this testing, this class was divided into 4 groups, depending on the number of the computers the children could operate. So we had to do 3 sessions or 4 sessions. Next, worth speaking about is the methodological limitations. Before moving on to the results, it's necessary to outline them. So we spoke about the government-owned, state-owned, and community-owned educational institutions, private and special educational institutions, technical requirements had to be ensured, and the internet speed had to be no less than 30 megabytes per second. Another important aspect, the educational institutions could reject from participating, and this was also one of the limitations in terms of interpreting these results. In fact, the number of such institutions was limited, and we had also a reserve of institutions from which we had to select additional ones with specific characteristics, but we honestly have to admit it anyway. And the last thing to mention in terms of these limitations, we need to underscore the statistical interpretation. If a certain factor was to do with lower or higher results, this indicated the statistical connection, interconnection. But for causal conclusions, this requires additional studies and exploration, and this is also necessary to bear in mind when we interpret these results. So what we're going to see now is, in the report, we use 3 types of statements. The most important of those are probably facts. The results obtained by pupils during testing, scores, points, medians, modes, the shares of pupils at different levels, cognitive lines, etc. The second type is statistical connections between the results and certain characteristics of the pupils, the formats, environments, clarity of explanation, the need to support the type of subject and the type of the settlement. And third, our hypotheses, our interpretations, generalizations, which allow us to formulate managerial practices, to understand which practices need clarification. So this architecture enables us to move from the results to factors, from factors to decisions, and then to specific implementation. So, dear colleague, one more thing to mention, basically. I understand that these are highly technical things, but they're necessary for us to properly interpret all of the results gained. So the average score is an important indicator. But this indicator alone is not enough for managerial decisions. Along with the mean, we have to look at the median and mode. It's a very simple explanation. Maybe you do not quite understand what median is, particularly for academic learners, but we are talking about the center of the distribution. Half of the students have a lower result, another half enjoy a higher result. And the mode indicates the most frequent result within a study group, so this allows us to interpret them. Different compilations of these results result in different managerial decisions. So if the median score, mode, and median decline at the same time, it means that the central part basically shifts. And if the average score is the same, but the results on different subtests differ, so we need additional studies. So it's necessary to understand all of these cognitive measurements that we are about to speak and allude to. So, dear colleagues, let's mention and begin math first, grade 6. The average score grew from 10.77 in 2023 to 11.52 in 2025. Along with that, the mediana stayed stable. So the overall score is average, is gradual in growth, but the typical result for the 6th grader remains the same. It's something that Oksana and Sergei and Ruslan have alluded to. We can basically conclude that despite the fact that the system is working in an extremely difficult and challenging situation, which hardly any educational system has ever experienced, according to the results gained during the 3 years, we see that the results for the 6th grader remains the same in math. So the top segment remains the same. The number of the students who perform better increased. The initial level has decreased. It's a positive shift, but it is moderate in terms of content line. The best statistic where the worst results were for geometry, inequalities, and equations. And only 1/5 of all of the participants could do score in the square of different geometrical shapes. So children, unfortunately, cannot transfer knowledge into application. The most complicated usually are the reasoning exercise. Only 40% of the students handled them. So for maths in grade 6, the center of results is stable. There is a gradual upward movement noticed, but the tasks for application and reasoning still remain the area of concern. Next. Slide demonstrate the results on maths in grade 8, and Sergei has already mentioned that. In a way, there's nothing much to add here in this regard. There is a certain decline observed of the average score of mode and mediana, which means that it's not only the edges of distribution have changed, but the central part, and lower is both the average and typical scores, and the learning outcomes have declined. In terms of cognitive measurements in 2025, the task for knowledge was coped with by about 60%. In terms of reasoning, 45%. Success was in terms of application only 41%.
An individual example, we can see the gap. The weight 84%, and finding the area of trapecia 19%. The gap between the knowledge and application. This shows the difference between recognition of a geometrical object and making action with it. The student knows the notion, yet has difficulty with application. It's an important signal. In 8th grade, there is a gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. Probably the gap is accumulated, which goes from topic to topic and becomes more noticeable in more complicated tasks. The next grade is 6th grade, Ukrainian language. Ukrainian language demonstrates different profile. Average score increased up to 34.86 in 2025. The median has increased from 30 to 33. The middle of results is moving upwards. 94% of participants are concentrated in the narrow range of results. It means that the results are grouped around the center. Such a profile can have two management readings. The average results is going up. The system must, however, focus on supporting and creating more complex, more sophisticated capabilities for students who can move faster. Most difficult are phonetics and orthoepics tasks. From year to year, we have the same. The average difficulty 24%, and for a relation between sound and letter completed by 23% of students. Working with text has better results, 53%. It means stronger possession of communicative component compared to separate elements of the linguistic system. Ukrainian language is 6th grade, demonstrates growth of the middle, concentration, distribution of results around the center, and the content part, which requires attention. Ukrainian language 8th grade. Ukrainian language on 8th grade demonstrates how important it is to analyze the structure of results. Methodologically, we also need to talk of it. Methodologically comparable is the result of 2024-25. The data of 2024 has a different scale. Therefore, it must be read separately. 2024-25's average score was stable, 49.31 in 2024, 50.19 in 2025. The median is stable as well, 48 and 48. Against the backdrop of general indicator, the situation is stable, yet inside the instruments there are different trajectories. Syntaxis demonstrates growth, practical block of morphology goes down, the task on differentiating parts of speech by 28% of students. Stable average score shows non-homogeneous picture on subtests. The decisions must be based not just on general score, also analysis of subtests and the groups of tasks. If we briefly summarize this part of this grade, we have stable center with moderate growth on the top, Ukrainian language on 6th grade, pulling up the medium, concentration around center, mathematics decline of average score, median and mode, and the gap between the knowledge and application, Ukrainian language 8th grade, stable medium and inequality inside of the subtests. Now the next block, which contains two subblocks. The first are the factors that you have received by the results of a survey of students and school principals. Number two is what is shown by institutional audit. I would like to emphasize on what I said before. Here we shall discuss the things which coexist. Yet we do not admit that they are the reasons of the results. This must be remembered during our report. To understand what the reasons are, we need to do separate studies. The questionnaires of students allows to see what characteristics the results coincide with. Statistical links which require careful reading, yet they give useful benchmark. Conventionally, there are three groups of factors. Sustainable factors are repeated in all or nearly all years in different blocks. Unstable factors are working depending on the subject, class, or context. Zero or insignificant factors are those the significant impact of which are not confirmed by data or confirmed not in every block. Next to the monitoring, we are using institutional audit as a context source. The monitoring looks at the level of student. Institutional audit looks into conditions, practices, management processes at school level. Those two sources are not mixed. So how to better formulate the questions for further analysis. Therefore, shall we start with sustainable factors? Among the sustainable factors, special attention belongs to didactic quality of lessons. The best results are related to understandability of explanations, requirements, working for thinking, and practical application. Positive attitude to subject. This points to the lesson as closest point of influence. During the lesson, data should transform into pedagogical action, explanations and knowledge, working with mistakes, the feedback. Another stable factor, internal condition of the student, lower anxiety, a positive attitude to the subject related to better results. They coexist, I would say, with better results. Number three, culture and environment, books at home, skills of reading, regular use of Ukrainian language form a part of the educational ecosystem of a child. Number four, referral for help. The students who refer for help to the teacher or parents often have better results. Therefore, it's important that the support is provided on time and supports the own educational activities of the student. Number five, type of municipality is a sustainable factor. This marker actually about different conditions of access to the resources, stable educational process, more stable personnel situation on schools in a wide sense to the education infrastructure. Together, the factors demonstrate that the results are formed in the interaction of the lesson, the student, family, environment, support, and access to resources. Unstable factors show dependence on results on the specific context, digital skills, availability of the device may be related to the results in some blocks, not having substantial connection in the other blocks. In 2025, IT skills worked in the 6th grade, but not in the mathematics on the 8th grade. For digital policy, it means that it's important to look not only in the availability of devices, also on how digital environment is used for education. Personal space at home also of importance, not always and not every time. It could be important in some blocks. However, it's not universal explanation of the results. The status of IDP, that's an interesting statement. The status of IDP requires correct reading. The status itself of the internally displaced person does not necessarily associate with worse results. Social vulnerability must be analyzed via the conditions and support and trajectory of education. Homework and private tuition has a different origin. Fail to complete homework is connected to worse knowledge. However, the important is not the maximum time, however, the quality of educational work. The same resources, the same conditions can have different significance for different students, subjects, and classes. Zero factors are the ones which show nothing and not confirmed with data in a stable way. Gender in mathematics gives no reasons for simplified findings. In mathematics, that connection disappears or has no stable significance. Where the difference is recorded, it requires a separate analysis. As the teacher encourages, it has limited significance. It must be combined with understandable explanation as well as the feedback. Duration of homework does not explain the results as we don't take into account the contents and regularity. Availability of training materials, educational materials, is of importance when such materials are included into pedagogical logics of lessons and independent work of the student. A general conclusion of this block is as follows. Availability of resources must move into action. The device, a criteria, plan, or platform have educational significance when they really change educational practice. The next sub-block of this block about the factors, that's what we can see in the institutional audit. Of course, as I believe we have as a useful source of data, and we decided that we need to use also to try to highlight certain things that happen at school from the position of institutional audit. In 2025, we held 33 institutional audits. That's not few. We have observed quite interesting things, yet I would like to say that all of those audits have been ad hoc. That's also important for correct interpretation. All of the audits have been ad hoc. As you may understand, there was initiative from school principal or founder of the school. We cannot say those audits have demonstrated generally something general for the system. We can see, because we can say they show the situation among 233 institutions, and yet we discuss it. So the first institutional signal is about application of knowledge. In the monitoring, we could see difficulties is transferring knowledge into new situation, especially in mathematics on the 8th grade. In audit, we record domination of frontal work at the lesson and far less common practices of the application of the material, project work, STEM, and differentiation. This is not a direct explanation of the results of monitoring. Maybe I have discussed many times such constraints, yet I would like to avoid incorrect interpretations. Yet this is a useful mirror to discuss didactic quality of the lessons. The next signal is about the system of assessment. The monitoring shows importance of understandable requirements, thinking, and ability of student to assess his own progress. The audit shows that the practice of self-assessment, mutual assessment, and choice of level of complexity of task are not always used. The third signal, criteria of assessment, understandable criteria help the student to see what is expected from him and how to improve the results. The audit shows that the criteria could be in the documents, but not always become the daily practice of the lesson. Those warnings show the important direction of activity. Educational instruments must be both available and built into the real educational activity. The next block is about management of quality of education based on data. Monitoring shows that part of the results remain stable, part of it is shifted, and part has uneven structure. Such results require the management cycle to see the data, to define the problem, to take the decision, to support the practice and check the trend. The audit shows that most of institutions in the proper sampling plans monitoring of results of education. At the same time, a far smaller part tracks the trends of all subjects of invariant component. Planning or monitoring does not guarantee the full cycle quality management. In this sense, monitoring and audit can usually complement each other. The first shows results of the student, the second, the conditions and processes at the level of educational institution. And here I would complete this block about influence of factors and come to the third one, which is the shortest. Actually, this is a bridge to the panel discussion and to our regional activities that we shall carry out in 5 regions. We tried to formulate the hypotheses or questions for discussion on the basis of the analysis that we made today. Conventionally, the first hypothesis is something that we have discussed a lot today, that the system has ensured stability. This is very important, especially under conditions of the war. And stability does not mean development. And with common efforts, including during the regional activities, how to think what can we do each of our place to make sure the system is both stable and also ensures development, starting from every teacher, his or her particular educational activity on every particular lesson, ending with the policies that are approved by the ministry or regulatory and legal acts by Parliament of Ukraine, approved by the Parliament. Number two, which is quite important, conclusion that must be kept in our head, that's cumulative effect of the gaps. Actually, why did we decide to say about this today? This cumulative effect has certain threats, even for high-quality implementation of profiles specialized school. When we say that the gaps which are accumulated in 8th or 9th grade, quite often it may happen that the choice of the profile of education in a future profile school, specialized school, will be caused with the constraints accumulated by the student rather than his real aspirations. We need to do our best that we avoid and provide for a fair choice of profile for the children. Also, several hypotheses on the operational level. On the assessment, we discussed this a lot, and yet the data shows that the tasks for knowledge are easier, and the tasks for thinking and application are more complex. This is an important fact for the entire system of assessment. If the educational purpose is to develop competences, the measurement must demonstrate replication of knowledge, also explanation, arguments, and working with new situation. This is true for the national monitoring, school evaluation, textbook, and other methodology materials. The system teaches more precisely what it can measure consistently. If application and thinking are important, they must be visible in programs, criteria, and daily practices of education. Otherwise, there is a risk of a drift towards a situation when we study what we evaluate. And here we need to think how to avoid this. The next is didactic quality of lessons. Actually, this is the closest point of influencing the results of the lesson. There, the student receive the tasks, criteria, feedback, ability to apply the knowledge. And the data shows a connection between better results and the stability of explanation. It means that professional development of teachers must be made closer to the practices of the lesson. I believe that the results of our monitoring, especially not the briefs, but the wide reports for 3 years could be a very interesting source of information for the entities which carry out professional development of teachers, for those who work with practicing and future teachers. And once again, I would like to reiterate the didactic quality of lessons. This is the closest point where we can change something. The next, digital capacity, gadgets, telephones, tablets,
Availability of gadgets or online resources cannot guarantee better results on their own. In 2025, we didn't see a stable dependency on that, so the data demonstrates that digital skills can be impactful in some blocks and be rendered inefficient in other blocks. So digital competency should be understood in a broader way. We talk here about the access to digital gadgets, the quality of didactic materials, the role of the teacher, the feedback and investment in the digital is absolutely necessary. But along with that, their educational effect basically depends on how these digital tools are integrated in the quality of the learning. So the digital efficiency of the school is not only measured by the number of gadgets, but the ability to translate that into the efficient learning and translating that into the quality of learning thus. Point 6, the hypothesis 6, the conclusion, if you like, it relates to managerial capacity. Monitoring and audit together demonstrate the importance of transitioning from documents to sustainable practice, planning for monitoring, clarity of all of the materials. All of this creates the foundation, and then we can see if this managerial cycle works. It includes the ability to see the data, formulate the problem, approve the issue, upgrade the teacher skills, and verify the results. In some international studies, this is called grounding of the best practices. So these solutions have attained the level of everyday interaction with the pupils. So managerial ability is the ability to translate solutions into the change of educational practice. So I think it's a very nice bridge that can be made to work with our educational specialists in terms of their attestation, certification, and most importantly, their professional development. I'm talking about schoolmasters. So this is something that we can discuss during our panel discussion, especially during our regional activities. And last conclusion to draw as a hypothesis that also ensues from the results of our study. It's about the cultural environment. The language, reading, books, confidence of applying the Ukrainian language, all of them play an important role in achieving educational outputs, and this requires very correct and proper formulation. So we're talking about the expansion of the quality Ukrainian context, work with the text, reading, speaking, writing, orthography, and language norms. Also about the type of municipality, availability to resources, security, and staffing. All of them shape various opportunities. So the system has to see these distinctions to be able to channel the support more accurately. This may be targeting the teacher, procuring the equipment, methodological work, working with different content lines. The key point is the family and cultural environment formulate the environment for the nurturing of the language. And of course, there needs to be understandable communication maintained between the pupil, the school, and the pupil's families. And now, basically, dear colleagues, something that we can formulate based on everything discussed, something that we can discuss during our panel discussion and thus build a bridge to our regional events, is a set of questions. So the first question is, how can we at the same time support those who are challenged during learning and those who are ready to move upwards faster. Question 2, how can we see the gaps earlier before their accumulation and prevent a profile school from starting from already established issues? Third, how to assess the application of reasoning and transfer of knowledge to a new situation. Fourthly, how the professional development of a teacher influences the process within the classroom. Number 5, how does the school build digital compliance and competence along with the regulating availability of devices? 6, is the system able to ground useful practices? 7, do we see individual child's outcomes as part of a broader architecture of opportunity? So these are the questions for us to endeavor to talk about, as well as during our regional events. So dear colleagues, thank you very much for your attention. I'm passing the floor to Ruslan. We will keep talking about it because I can see that some of you are ponderous. You are already deeply concentrated on this food for thought. So today we have gathered in order to start reflecting on all of this data. We didn't want to just make the presentation to present the percentages comparisons, but we also wanted to make sure that it's more visual. We'll be able to speak about every subject, about every region, but today we're only starting this conversation. And we are beginning that within the framework of our panel discussion. So let me invite our colleagues and peers, Ms. Lilia Grinevich, the former Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. Also, let me invite and give the floor to the Deputy Chairman of the Committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine Education and Science and Innovation, Sergei Kolyboshin. Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine, Nadia Kuzmichova. Educational expert at RFA organization, Ms. Olena Zaplotnitska. And someone that we have presented to you today, acting head of the educational section of UNICEF in Ukraine, Alvaro Fortin. All of us have gathered here today in this room, have heard about the results of our study before we actually even saw the presentation itself. So I have a couple of questions to pose to you for us to discuss not only the deliverables of this study, but also what can be done further based on these results gained. So I would like to start with you, Nadia, if I may. My question is as follows. Can I reject it? No, you can simply say that you will answer later. So during the first year of the presentation of our studies, which began in 2023, I went out to see the journalists and I said something that was later on discussed for a long time. I said, clearly we see that the war has an impact on the learning outcomes. And I believe that in order to move on to this specialized profile school is possible for us. In the year 2023, so much havoc was raised, so many discussions were ensued as a result of that. So my first the first conclusion is I am a proponent of the profile school, and within our service of educational quality, we are doing everything to support you on this point. But Ms. Nadia, do you see this window of opportunity for the Ukrainian educational system, given the results that we have been presented with, saying that this profile school will still enable us to improve, to refine the pupils' knowledge at the expense of the system? Thank you for your question. The first point to mention, actually every link in this chain should not process the gaps, but to ensure succession. Therefore, the results that we have obtained for us as managers gives the clarity of what is happening and what we have to work on within the basic education, grades 5 through 8. Through 9 even, so that when we approach the high school, grade 9, within the architecture of the high school that we would like to build when grade 10 is of certain adaptation, it will still allow for an opportunity to identify the differences between the levels that the children have attained and the possibility for catching up for those losses, but still not being under the illusion that the gaps attained during the previous stage can be compensated for during half a year of the high school studies. Moreover, we would like to avoid the situation that high school should be something that corrects the losses of the previous stage. Just likewise, it's wrong to say that higher education will also improve all of the gaps that we may have accumulated during secondary educational stage. So I would like to revert to something I started with. Every step of the way has to result in learning outcomes to become steps and foundations for the next stages when we speak about primary, secondary, and basic school. So the results that we have at first should serve the beginning for us to keep building on at the higher school, but not for the higher school to say that now you have to forget everything and now we are going to retrain you. So basically, all of the changes proposed for the high profile school are aimed at that. I think the possession of this data and not to working with this data is one of the managerial wrongful things to do, and we cannot allow for that to happen. So I'm sure that all of the managers present in this room and who will continue working on the back of the study and its results will have to approach them as the foundation for their follow-up actions to be translated into specific actions within their communities and educational institutions. Probably this is the end to my answer. And if I sum it up, the Ministry of Education and Science, as I have highlighted twice, is not a proponent of correction, but rather the policies that we are intensifying and keep implementing are meant to modify and correct all of the systemic gaps between the stages, between the links, and deal with the complications that we have to manage in each of these links. And we have to work on that not only at the national level, but first of all at the regional and local levels. Thank you. I fully agree with you. But let me also add by saying that it's not so much about correction, but rather understanding what happens at the basic school, what allows us to take on to the high profile school, subject-based school, because all of this lays foundation at an earlier stage. Yes, definitely. But in this case, the first thing to mention is the results of the study and the previous studies. They are made during the war. I haven't seen the full version of the study, but this is incredibly valuable. And I'm sure that they also have a lot of ground for work, starting with the educational institution and specific students and specific teachers. So this is something which is invaluable for us because the implementation begins bottom up. So one of the indicators in the study, not for us to be over-optimistic, but still for us to be adequate in approaching the reality. We can see the stability of the indicators. There is no regression on key subjects and on key points presented here today within the wartime of full-scale invasion. So all of this serves as a very important indicator, not once again to lull ourselves and say how everything is wonderful, but to make sure that the system is standing, it's not crumbling, it is adapting, and in the conditions when there is no regress, there are still possibilities for us to ensure improvements at follow-up stages. And of course, the children in grade 6th, we still have time to make sure that before they come to the high school, given the dynamics and the specificity identified in the study in the next stage during grades 8 through 10. It's still possible for us to improve them and prepare them better for the high-profile school, understanding that today's pupils in grade 8, of course, we have also ninth graders, but entering grade 10 and adapting the high-profile school policies and methodologies will be more complex, and it will require a greater adaptation for children when they move on to grade 10. Thank you. So Nadia and Sergey. Sergey, we are moving on to you. I would like to ask a two-fork question. Maybe they're not very much interrelated. But yesterday we started the discussion concerning maths in application in our society. This has nothing to do with our study, but yesterday everyone became an expert in math, and on all platforms in different kind of media, they began to reason concerning what is to be done about math, and all of our results give us evidence concerning what's happening to maths and what we are to do with that. It's the question to you not only as an MP, but also as a maths teacher. So this is my first question to you. Yes, both yesterday and today, whenever we go for tests, there's a lot of activity take place because everybody can make films, everyone can be a doctor, and some MPs, about 50 of them, fully understand what needs to be done with maths. It has to be squashed. It has to be completely eliminated from our school system. And they say everything is bad with the math in our country, right? So let's not do anything about it. Let's have no tests on it. The government or the country doesn't need it. Let us not measure the temperature of the sick people because it makes us feel quieter, and let us not count how many drones or missiles have been hit because it's much easier for us to live this way. So from my standpoint, this is not the position of statesmen, and this is not something which is targeting children. I think that this discussion will follow, will have its follow-up both at the parliamentary level and at the government level. So this is the reflection of the discussion that has been ongoing here in our educational system for many years. When parents, for example, say, my kid is in 7th grade, we understand, they say, why math is needed. But as soon as they go to the 11th or the 12th grade, they deny these arguments and they go emotional instead. So what needs to be done about maths? Learn it and teach it better. There's nothing else that we can do. Look, I never expected this round of applause. Thank you. All of them are math teachers, so this is not a surprise. Measuring, of course, is necessary because without measuring, the system will definitely follow the line of the least resistance, and it will not train thinking but memory instead of knowledge. For example, the ability to answer test exercises. We can see that at the level of grade 8, according to the data accumulated. So measurement is not the end in itself, it's not an end in itself, it's just a means to an end. So I would like us to engage in this discussion concerning this monitoring. It's not the end goal. Measurement needs to give us a start to more systemic processes to be launched. For many years, we have been arguing that the government needs a strategy for overcoming educational losses. But without understanding what to overcome, it's never possible to bridge these gaps. So this is my answer. I'm probably also professionally distorted, and I may go on and on for 45 minutes. But if you do not object, I would like others to answer. Well, professional deformation in the Parliament of Ukraine usually stops you with a special beep sound. Usually they use electric current. These are details and a joke. So Sergei, anyway, if I may, you have spoken about educational measurements. Do you see a vision concerning these educational measurements, for example, at the level of monitoring, mandatory ones, at every cycle of learning, every stage of learning? Do you have your own visions concerning how this is to be followed? I'm not a super professional in this regard. I understand that we need data, because without this data, without the evidence base, it will be rendered into ineffective medicine. But we need to make sure that children are not stressed. Because when on a monthly basis somebody comes with some monitoring measurements, I remember it very well from my professional background. This is no good. In terms of the complexity of tests during the tests, there's nothing much, but it's sometimes so stressful, so this kills children's motivation to write in a better way. So the idea is like the big brother is watching you, but he's not standing in your way to get what you need. And another caveat to make, the big brother in this request is not about anti-utopia or the system controlling us, but it's just a metaphor, because otherwise journalists will reinterpret everything improperly. Thank you very much, Serhiy. Now, Lydia, thanks for being with us today. You, as the former Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine, someone who started this reform of the new Ukrainian school, what is your vision of these learning outcomes and of the results of the study? And my question probably will be more narrower. We see three categories of results presented, those being knowledge, how children reflect their knowledge, their ability to apply this knowledge, and their ability to reason. With reference to knowledge, all of you were able to see both in the Ukrainian language and math that the percentage was high. But as soon as we speak about application and reasoning, there is a decline.
The concept of New Ukrainian School was exactly about it, to teach the children how to apply the knowledge in the practice and be able to think. And this was the main philosophy. How do you see it? The second part of the question, which could be connected, those other matters related to the gaps, where 5-6% of children with high achievement, 5-6% of children with initial achievements, and actually we speak of the inclusion. Whether this inclusion is needed in terms of how children support, how teachers support children on the lesson, where there are enough children with sufficient and medium, and also children with higher level of knowledge. Those are two questions which may not be connected to each other at the first glance, yet your opinion will be quite interesting. Thank you for this question. First of all, I would like to say that indeed the new Ukrainian school, one of the tasks of the new Ukrainian school is to learn how to apply the knowledge for the practical resolution of life situations. And that this survey shows once again that even on the 6th grade, which studies under a new Ukrainian school program on mathematics, we can see, first of all, only the knowledge-based approach. It continues on the 8th grade, which follows the old standard of 2011. And by the way, there are problems and more decline. Yet it demonstrates that our curricula and our textbooks and methods of teaching actually are not practical enough. As Mr. YURIYCHUK in his presentation spoke of the practicality of what we would like to do. We declare that we study, how we teach how to use knowledge on practice, but this is not enough in our textbooks. Please open our textbooks in the program of New Ukrainian School. The teacher needs an arsenal of such tasks that he can give to children. And this approach must go through the practicality, the methods of teaching, scientific and practical textbooks and manuals. And now there is a project Education for Life, which must be helpful in this. And those results demonstrate that we shall keep working on this matter and also arm our teachers in a good sense of this word with the arsenal and the range of such approaches and tasks. When we speak of the inclusion and individualization, another two important tasks in the new Ukrainian school. On one hand, we need to include everyone. On the other hand, to enable the space of development. This is actually a complex task, and I would like to draw your attention to another very good result, the indicative result of this study, those factors which are mostly influential. What mostly influence? Didactics of the lesson, and we have spoken about this in the first part of the lesson, how to apply the knowledge in the practice. By the way, for fairness, I would like to say that on Ukrainian language on the 6th grade, if you have pointed your attention, it clearly tells that the thinking in children develops better than on the 8th grade. And we have seen this effect in the programs of Ukrainian language, and the textbooks provide for that. Coming back to the inclusion as well as individualization. The next factor, which is quite important, for example, referral for help. That's number 4 or something. Referral for help. This is often educational losses. It looks so children who do not refer for help on mathematics, what happens to them next? They more stockpile, and there is stockpiling of educational losses. And then there is a question, what is the policy of involvement of such children? Let me put a thread to another incredible result of this study. This is gap between urban and rural areas. Why in the village that referral for help can have even lack of referral for help can have even more scope than in the urban areas. Therefore, the question of political decisions: what do we change in our schools in order to identify the educational losses of those who do not demonstrate that and never refers for help? What must be the policy of helping such children? I would like to remind of PISA with 5 years of difference between rural and urban areas. And this is an important public problem which concerns those who are on top, or who are below, who are on the grassroots. And in the rural areas, those on the grassroots are much more numerous. And this is related to the remote education, bad internet coverage, a lack of gadgets, lack of availability of gadgets. When it lasts for 5 years, the generation grows. The entire generation is growing. I believe that after this study, in this part of children who are below the average, we must make some clear political decisions how to work with them. Instead, there are children, and it was discussed here, who do not come to the top, the smaller part which does not come to the top. There is another question. For teachers, what are the opportunities or to individualize, or to customize the educational process? To my mind, such opportunities are wider compared to what we had 10 years ago due to digitalization. Because today we can give diverse variants of tasks, we can make individual track of the child, we can give more than the majority of the class, and this gives the opportunity via electronic materials accumulated in different projects, through textbooks which have electronic annexes. This is one of the requirements which should have been for the textbooks, the conditions for customization at the lessons. Today, via electronic additions to paper textbooks, we have positive examples. The question is, however, that the teacher must know well how to use it and where to find. To my mind, all that is possible to be resolved. It's important how to convey this to a particular teacher in the village, in the city, how to put it to the classroom. And for that, there is lack of certificate. I'm quoting the presentation because the presentation was very well structured and with the right conclusions and the wishes for the future. And yet, we need to talk now of quality of professional development that we give to our teachers, because we decided everything with a scope. The scope has increased. We have the state subvention. We have quite many providers. And yet the question of education and what the teacher receives will support in the classroom practice, that's a question which still remains. Thank you, Lilia, for the protection of rural schools. I draw your attention for 3 years in a row. I can see the problems that we discussed on the rural school. And indeed, the results are not so good as we would like to see. Yet this year, I have noticed another trend which was discussed in a brief. The trend of the results of rural schools is better, much better than urban schools. Maybe this is our chance. Maybe this is the hope that we can start well with rural school and give something else. I believe that rural school must be protected. Among the rural schools, there are wonderful schools, and rural school operates in more difficult conditions, especially in the frontline territories if there is remote education, for the objective reasons. We need to think how to help them, and first of all, children who are under such conditions for more than 4 years. Olena, I come to you. I would like to ask you quite many questions, and yet I will ask a simple one. What you have been impressed with as a person who was involved for 3 years with this study? What has impressed you in the results? Are there any statements? To be impressed, simply this is a question which is quite different. I was impressed that 60% of children, we can see this trend, we believe that this is resilient, 60% of children are the medium level. Yet to understand what is the medium level, we need to remember that those are children who have fulfilled or could not even fulfill half of the task of the test, and the expert believes those are easy or medium difficulty. Actually, it's not a good result. And those are the results that force us to think. And what is missing is reading with the understanding of this report. There are quite many aspects which are about practical implication. And 3 years is probably time when we need to come down to earth and think, what shall we use in the practice? It was about teaching and about what we can change on the practice. And this report suggests of basic things. Actually, what affects the results and what concerns directly the activity of the teacher. Among the quite many factors, there is a group which is about working in the classroom. The children who were saying that if the teacher explains before we understand, until we understand, and gives clear instructions, and when the students understand what in particular is required, what are the requirements by the teacher, his results are higher. All other factors related to the educational process have been of lower importance. And the question is another puzzle to this discussion about practice. For the last 3 years, I have been working in communities with a team of specialists, and we are helping communities to develop strategies. Education is one of the priority sectors where we thoroughly examine the needs of the educationalist, parent community, and the children, and what communities must do in order to improve the quality of education. In most of the communities, the vast majority of communities, parents express very high trust towards teachers. They say teachers are the best part of the school, the strongest part of the school. When we ask teachers, when we ask parents what to do, that the school operates better and quality of education is higher, the parents speak of 3 things. The first is to improve quality of teaching of subjects. High trust to teachers does not mean that there is no didactic crisis. The parents can feel quite well the deterioration of the level. They can see educational losses of children. Number two, more attention to physical and emotional status of children. And the next answers can vary. One of them is about the feedback to the parents about what is happening to the children in the class, and to improve interaction, communication between teacher and student. Those things are quite practical, and they're about our study, what we have seen. That practice is coming down to earth, slowing down the work of the teacher to prevent accumulation of educational losses. Another study which I would like to mention, we have quite many studies, yet what is missing is having them united to look comprehensively into the results, to change in the educational policy and the practice of schools. When COVID began with full-scale invasion, the state service of education began to study the quality of educational process, and raised the question of motivation. What the teachers complain about? Why do they speak of educational losses? From the perspective of the teacher, that's because of low motivation for studies of the students. The topic of motivation is discussed by everyone. There is mutual allegation. Who is guilty of such low motivation? Students have answered, and they absorbed the responsibility. They said, well, it is difficult for us, yet we never do it. And they have communicated one important thing, that the majority of the educational materials they have to master independently. This leads to accumulation of educational losses. The children lose motivation. This is all interrelated. Why does it happen? And again, the last statement, the study which people hardly remember in 2017, by methodology of OECD, they made the study. We called it integrity of education process, which is integrity of the education system. That there are no simple solutions, that in practice of teacher, the current routine practice is there is something which makes it not impossible to focus more attention, like slowing down the work with educational losses and the achievement that majority of the class understand the topic rather than shifting responsibility to students or parents. So, as the moderator, I would like to, as an exception, we did not plan, yet we have another guest, Alexander Savruk. You have no right to refuse. Mother and father have requested kindly. We invite you while you walk. To Mr. Elvar, I would like to ask one question, if you still hear me. I would like to ask one question as follows. UNICEF team supported quite. Please come over to Mr. Alvar. UNICEF team supported the state service of quality of education of Ukraine, and I know that you also support the projects which exist in Ukraine, and which are also about overcoming the educational losses, and other projects which are about the school. To my mind, if we speak about the results of the education, it's not about some decision from the top, and there is no decision from grassroots. The system must have two-way traffic. I would like to ask you whether in this part you see all of the partners who work today with schools, because Alexander Savruk, as the Dean of Kiev Mohila Business School, and quite many other projects have very good tradition of working with educational managers, educational teams, whether UNICEF supports this kind of projects.
Yes, so we do support work that has impact at school level, and we one common saying in UNICEF is that we have one foot on the ground and one foot on the ministry, because we try to work both with the policy level and the rollout of decisions that are supportive of children's rights, children's education, but also trying to work at the school level, at the field level, at the health center level. So we are supporting of these policies. In education, we are right now trying to work both in the conception of different policies and supporting several of the deputy ministries in working through re-strategizing and developing policies and implementation towards the hromadas, but we are also working with hromadas and with schools to improve education. So to your question, that would be my more straightforward answer. But I also wanted to add an appendix. I wanted to invite you to consider something that I've been reflecting on after reading this study, and it's on the idea of learning loss. That concept has shifted a lot in the last 15, 20 years. Before, students of learning loss were of two types and in two very different types of countries. One was in very wealthy countries where you basically assess children when they finished grade 1, then they went on vacation, and then they came back on grade 2. You measured things like how much did they recall of the times table. And if they didn't recall much, or they couldn't use much of the times tables in real practice, then you assume the learning loss, and this is where teachers had to do, like, go through the cycle again in a review process. The other one was studies on learning loss in poorer countries, countries that were facing very difficult situations where the likelihood of a student once out of education, the likelihood of that student returning to education was very, very low. And these studies were, if the student learned how to multiply and never comes back to school, would the child still be able to use multiplication in his regular life when selling things in the market, when this type of thing? Our case after COVID is very different. It's more about consistent and constant and systematic disruptions, right? And this is something that Ukraine keeps living through, because even after COVID, the situation is such that students are constantly being disrupted. But the motivation of the country to keep education going means that students do actually come back to school. Most of the students do actually return to some type of education, either online or face-to-face with teachers. And this is why one of the findings of this study is quite significant to me, and it's the relationship with, and I am just basically re-emphasizing something that's already been said about the utilization of that learning in practical situations. I wonder, for example, what that discrepancy between rural and urban was before the invasion, because if it wasn't as significant as it is today, and if students in rural areas don't have lesser utilization of whatever concepts they manage to get in whatever ways they are learning into practical situations, yes, they might be, because of greater disruptions, having less achievement in the test, but that doesn't mean that the learning is less solid for the future. So when you look at these results of this this research, I just wonder how much more analysis we can do. There's so much information there, there's so much data that we can use for further questions that I invite you to consider these results just as a first step and continue using this data to continue analyzing and continue thinking about what actually means learning loss and learning disruption in this particular context. And that was just a personal thing that was going through my head. So sorry for taking more of your time.
Дякую. Дякую вам. Пане Олександре.
Thank you. Now, Alexander, I have already mentioned the School of Educational Managers. And I see that now that you have modified this concept, and you're not only working with teachers or schoolmasters, but you're also working with the entire hromadas, communities. So to what extent do these results of such studies matter in the process of organizing your training for such teams? Thank you, Ruslan, for your question. Thank you, dear colleagues. I take off my head before you for everything that you are doing under current situation, current circumstances. Clearly, you have not just stabilized, but also laid groundwork for the follow-up development. So when talking about our experience and our search and our communication with all of the possible colleagues, including the ones that are present here during this panel discussion, we are standing aside. We have our own stance on this issue, which stems from the nature of our managerial logic of Kiev Mahila Business School. It's a managerial school which speaks about holistic, consistent approaches, meaningful focuses to be attached to managerial processes, etc. So we are also very much worried about educational systems because we are an intrinsic part of this educational system. So we experience its ups and downs together with everyone involved. So we have experimented at the School of Educational Managers. We have decided to do that, thinking that leaders in their schools can really raise their educational establishments to very high levels. And the practice after 4 graduations, unfortunately, testified not to a great deal of upshot, to put it softly. And when we see a schoolmaster within a community, we see that usually the power is in the hands of the heads of such communities. So I decided to put the show to an end, the School of Educational Managers, and instead we started dealing with community heads and the 5 crazy community heads who are ready to invest all of their energies. We called upon everyone willing, and 5 of them were willing to participate. And now we have an extraordinary search that we are undertaking with such communities. These people represent both regional and village community level. The range is quite vast, as you can see. Regional town heads have also participated in these programs because they also affect changes at regional levels. So it's very important for us to arrive at a way to involve and engage the proper understanding and willingness and energies at the level of the municipal heads, community heads, because we do not always see their willingness. These people have to be communicated proper feedback, for example. And such types of studies work very well in order to involve these people in the logic of accountability, because there is no better strategic level decision taking other than municipality level and educational tasks. The rest is tactical a priori. So accountability and readiness to get engaged follows, and then what information to work with, internal information or external independent information. So all of this works within the logic of our search. Talking about your study, incredibly interesting were the points highlighted, but what is also worrisome is when children find themselves into another educational environment, I mean the European environment of education. We have hundreds of thousands of such children who are beginning to compare that education as opposed to the education here. That system begins with searching, asking for the question, why? What for do I have to calculate the square of a triangle? For example, we begin with the square of triangles. And then we begin to see what we have, very good theory and not very good logic of application. For them, these are not very well interrelated things. For example, there are such things that cause us to look into what way, with what priorities pursued, why we're doing this or that, and how we calculate and measure deliverables. So these are the important points that, in essence, have to be rethought, reconsidered, and reset within our system. They're so numerous. We have already accumulated so much material with your help, Inclusive, based on different studies, institutional studies, Inclusive, something that requires further studying, exploring for us to better comprehend at what level, at what stage of development, where this logic transition as the new Ukrainian school into further follow-up systems in order to align that better and fine-tune it. So thank you for your participation in such projects. And colleagues, we are very much open to you, and we will be sharing our experience with you, because we are tasked with a new, aware, holistic system of shaping a conscious individual at the level of community, where education has a very important role to play. Not all of the roles, of course. We have a lot of elements. We have sports, music, arts, business, numerous other things, which are not very well interrelated at times, because everyone is different, and we do not have a universal mechanism how to tie it all into one single unit at the level of the community. So we are experimenting, and we are willing to engage into this experiment together with you. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. I thank all of the panelists for this discussion. You have extremely clever and proper ideas and recommendations, so we can arrive at a conclusion that there is no one magic element that will be used tomorrow and the entire system will be put to rights. Yes, recently we made some conclusions, and Nella deals with certification of pedagogical staff. And recently, together with Nadia, we saw these results of certification, especially for math teachers. Once again, I beg your pardon, we are reverting to math. As we all can also speak about certification of primary school teachers and Ukrainian school teachers. We dealt with all that. And we have one fascinating element. All of these are the teachers who willingly go for the certification. They're pretty confident individuals. And most interestingly, during this procedure of self-assessment, the most critical are mathematics teachers. So critical, in fact, that experts sometimes assess them much higher than they actually assessed themselves. So this is the first statement to make, and we discussed it with you, Nadia. And point two to make, we also saw some professional standards that these teachers have to employ, and we saw where they were coming short of, and they were sincere in admitting that. And secondly, when we speak about learning outcomes, they do not just come from nowhere. This stems from teachers, from the teaching team, but of course, at the top is the teacher. So I have a question to Nadia about the challenges in terms of upskilling the teachers, what they are lacking for them to teach how the children can apply their knowledge in practice, because this is an entirely different paradigm. What can be done further? The first point to mention, this year, we have another pilot project, piloting another tool on allocating government money. You know that we have always had a government subvention when we allocated this money for upgrading the skills of the teachers, advanced learning for the teachers. So this is the same amount of money, identifying the same priority categories for the teachers, but the tool is changing in terms of how to appropriate this money. So in the year 2025, you can take advantage of this money via Vector, state-owned platform, where the money is given to the teachers, and our teachers, when they register on this platform, when they go through the verification of their educational institution, they get their virtual money, and they simply are capable of understanding what they would like to spend this money for. So what to spend this money for is also limited. And this is the first part of your question. The government identifies priority areas which are important to raise the aptitudes of the teachers, and this is supported with the state funds. And this is not the only source. Moreover, practice evidences, and this year this is not the only source, because the major part of the teachers usually do that with the help of regional orders, and this pushes us to follow up reasoning that we are working on about the general approaches to changing qualification measurements, because I'm not talking about the tool and not the amount of money, but in terms of identifying the priorities, priority groups, incentivizing teachers to raise their aptitudes, and controlling. So basically, we have to argue that the system does not comply with reality and it requires some changing, including the fact that we will have to implement a high-profile school coupled with lots of other challenges and the requirements of the teachers to be able to work with another circle of problems or issues, I would put it this way, not only the ones that we are discussing today. So identifying priorities, we have it. And amongst those priorities, and I'm sure that most of you are well aware of them, you have read them, you have analyzed them. So there we speak about making up for educational losses, psycho-emotional support, and separate areas to incentivize and urge educational managers to raise their qualifications. All of this is available in 14 core areas or pillars by which we incentivize education providers to develop specific courses, teachers, and educational managers to take advantage of these opportunities. So right now, this is our core government-owned instrument. But taking this opportunity, I would like to broaden the space and to speak not only about the money and the mechanism to raise people's capabilities, but also other available capacities which are developed by the Ministry of Education with the support of our international partners, including the ones present with us on this panel and the ones who are not with us here today, but still available to every teacher. We are speaking about competence-based tasks. This year, they have been developed for grade 7 and through 9. They're available on all of the areas with diagnostics, examples, and of how this can be applied. Lilia referred to the ministry's policy Education for Life, where we have conceptuals developed for every field, not only as theory, but when you log on this platform, you will be able to analyze the progress of the child from grades 1 to 11 via the results or different kinds of competencies, examples of tasks. We have all of these webinars available in all of the fields that have been presented and held, and we had a huge number of registrations. At some point, we even had a collapse because we would have something like 20,000 registrations from teachers on each of these webinars. And right now, all of them are available to all those who are interested and would like to utilize these instruments. A separate block on assessment, once again, with all of the necessary materials, tools, assistance that teachers can borrow and use them, employ them without any additional developments at their own level. So in addition to raising their aptitudes, where the government presents subsidies, where there is regional order available, we also have these two mainstream, well, one single mainstream policy, but the two platforms which I am kindly inviting all of you to log on and disseminate information about these platforms within your teaching staff. So this is Education for Life, where everything that I have listed is gathered, and separate competence-based tasks developed with the support of UNESCO. And Osvitoria is a separate portal that can be accessed via the site of our ministry. It's also freely available, and you can utilize all of these opportunities alluded to. Thank you, Nadia. We have been working for 2 hours. I thank you very much indeed for your active involvement, like I said it. During this month of June, we will go to 5 macro regions of Ukraine to present the results of this study. But most important for us, of course, is to receive proposals and recommendations as to what is to be done further. So we have some reference opportunities, but how are we to change? This is question one. If I may, I would like to take all of the proposals submitted by you, our dear panelists, to be included in these proposals, and they will be unified during the month, assimilated during the month of July. Also, taking this opportunity, I would like to refer to all of our friends, for example, the Academy of Pedagogical Sciences and our colleagues from there. And we would also like to ask you from the academic point of view, get involved. Look at these results. You, as the chief of the Institute of Pedagogy and Psychology, see what needs to be done at the level of scientific and academic knowledge as the source of our knowledge. We also have the heads of local communities present with us here today. Please dig deeper into these results. Get involved in the results attained by your educational institutions. Moreover, these tests are already publicly available. You can also go through these public tests with your schools. Point three, something that I would like to do separately. Every time I always refer to the rectors of pedagogical institutes and postgraduate institute chiefs. We are commonly answerable for the results that our students gain. I am a proponent of the fact that we have to go out of the box, out of the bubble of our professional community, and we have to demonstrate to the entire society what happens to our learning outcomes. And this will definitely be a certain output for our activities. But once again, one thing transpires and is clear. We have a lot of ground to cover. There is direction set for us. And once again, we have to thank teachers, pupils, their parents, managers, because in such difficult, challenging times for Ukraine, they're doing everything for the system of education to keep developing. Thank you, dear colleagues. At this, we put the presentation to a close. Thank you very much indeed again.